Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episodes, and I am sure that World Talent Economy Forums. We have our different audience from different part of the world. But already this guest panel, I think everybody know about Mr. Rob. We have our innovative partner, Mr. Brian. We have our very dedicated partner, Mr. Alex, and Dr. William. So I want to start with Mr. Rob. So I'm sure that already you introduce yourself with our World Talent Economy Forums. We want to discuss about industrial innovations. In COVID period, what type of innovation actually happening right now?
Well, a lot of the innovation that's happening right now is moving towards robotics and automation. We've sped up the process for remote collaboration substantially during this pandemic. Most of the major platforms have advanced at an almost unbelievable rate. And as we move into manufacturing, what you're seeing is the rapid introduction of robotics and robotic technology and the evolution of autonomous driving technology into robotics to improve that capability. The idea is to have as many people remote as you can. And when you do have people on the factory floor, have them far enough apart so they're not infecting each other, and so you can keep the plant up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Mr. Brian, you have a lot of engagement specifically for AI as well as different innovative industry. So how do you want to share your experience with our audience?
Sure. So I founded Ahura AI, which is an artificial intelligence company that enables people to learn 3 to 5 times faster than traditional education. I'm also chairman of the board of Neural Tunes that uses music as medicine to solve for PTSD, depression, and anxiety, especially during these COVID times. Happy to talk about that today. But I'm happy to be here, so thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Brands. I want to ask Mr. Dr. William. Dr. William, you have huge experience specifically for policy as well as politics. So how do you want to share your experience with us? Specifically, what will happen when Biden administration will come and what will happen in the innovative industry?
Okay, well, what I can tell you is that I am, and I'm sure the audience, the rest of the world already knows that President-elect Biden has nominated former presidential candidate Peter Buttigieg to serve as the Secretary of Transportation during his administration. And quite frankly, that's a bold choice, in as much as for the central themes of Biden's campaign has been to quote unquote build back better, which essentially is to focus in on building American infrastructure. And that's from roads, bridges, as well as a number of other things, including what we now know and what the 2 other guests have already referred to, and that is the use of technology, whether it's AI or access to the internet in terms of supporting remote collaboration, or in this case, the supply chain, which is one of the things that we're actively going through and doing a comprehensive reassessment with the rollout of the various vaccinations. And it's not just the rollout and the delivery of them, it is also the tracking of those people that have received the vaccines, because as we know, you have to have 2 vaccines. And so therefore, there's an entire comprehensive system of recording who gets what, when, and when they need to come back in order to make the vaccines fully effective. So getting back to soon-to-be Secretary Buttigieg, his approach, his general experience comes from being the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana. And in that regard, oftentimes here in the United States, the leaders in innovation are the mayors, because they are the closest to the ground in terms of the problems that citizens face. So they're the ones that have to deal with the roads. They're the ones that have to deal with transportation logistics. They're the ones that have to deal with notions in terms of attracting new businesses to invest in the area by building office parks and various other facilities. And so in that regard, having somebody with the kind of on-the-ground, boots-on-the-ground experience in terms of real development, bind and in a lead position on infrastructure is significant in ways that we just won't yet understand. And that includes not only rapid transit, reconstruction of roads and bridges. Now, more importantly, what happens is that is going to unleash at least an economic exponential factor in the sense that for every job that you create with regard to infrastructure, whether it's roads, whether it's the technological backbone or that infrastructure, that creates a middle class, targeted middle class economic benefit. And for every job that you create, you generally end up supporting 3 or 4 other people in that household. So that one job that's created in that kind of area that cannot be outsourced for example, building a bridge or a building, then supports 3 other people, and that economic impact will ripple through the economy. Now, what I'm heartened by is, and what I just heard, and I'm actually pleased and caught me off guard because I did not know, was the notion of the idea of speeding up remote collaboration. It never occurred to me that that would be a qualitative benefit of this COVID pandemic. Because quite frankly, all I can say, Rob, is you're absolutely correct. I was absolutely astounded because in many ways, otherwise, this would have taken at least a decade or 2 for companies to try to rethink and incorporate it. And when you start talking about remote collaboration, it spans the entire gambit, which is why I'm so blown away, Rob. And don't mind me gushing on you, but I am going to say when it's deserved, it's deserved. Because now it just occurred to me that when they start talking about snow days, even with schools and education, they're like, there are no more school days because the kids can now learn from home. And so that I'd like to hear more about, but I don't want to take up any more time because I know batting a cleanup is Alex. Alex?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mr. Alex, like, how do you want to share your experience about creating better ecosystem, a sustainable ecosystem? Yeah.
Okay. So as usual, I, like most people, have a lot of information and knowledge. So I try to cover main categories, main sectors, and then subcategories if the conversation takes us that direction. As we are in a really exciting, super exciting and interesting time with technological advances, AI, just computers, the worldwide internet, satellites, starting to explore the galaxy and all of that. Just such an interesting time. At the same time, we have to stay within balance, and we're not in balance. That's why we're seeing ecosystem collapse. That's why we're experiencing anthropogenic global warming and climate changes related to man's impact on the environment. Unfortunately, we're extracting resources beyond their ability to recharge, but technology could accelerate those problems, those issues. At the same time, technology could help us. Again, it's like we have 2 different directions to go. We have either a really exciting, prosperous, utopian future, or we have technology and all these things that we're creating slowing down our progress and our chance at sustainability. So there are a lot of subjects. I have taken a course in solar technology, a college course. I've taken a college course in green building construction and design. In that course, we learned a lot about LEED certifications, solar, living roofs, incorporating LED lighting, water efficiency. So there's a lot of ways where industry, businesses, and new homes could have LEED certifications, and there's different levels of LEED certifications. Really interesting how we can incorporate new technologies, also just sustainably, like incorporating non-toxic zero VOC paint and other incorporating other building materials that are maybe from recycled material. There's a lot of room for that. There's also, we're using this automation in different sectors, but we could use it in the hydroponics section and aquaponics and ways to grow food as we continue to see climate disruptions around the world. I do want to say that sometimes it's going to be taking jobs. It's going to be taking jobs away from people maybe without a high school diploma. Like, they now have the robot flipping hamburgers. They have them at checkouts at grocery stores. So it's there's a lot of pros and cons when it comes to that. I want to mention how the worldwide internet has connected all of us around the world, which is interesting that we have the chance to do this. I don't know the time frame, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, doctors started doing those remote surgeries where they were doing surgeries, remotely with the video camera. So now Google has the VR goggles and the gloves that you could actually do stuff through the internet, through Rob was mentioning, through remote controls and all that. So I think we're just going to continue to see new changes. Infrastructure is extremely important. We need to redo a lot of roads because we have new ways to do them too. I think that we need to focus more on like the long-term mindset of the roads and not just these short-term aspects. I think we need to install more roundabouts, and I just can't wait until we have more self-driving automated vehicles, and it just makes our roads more efficient, less crashes, and a lot of other subjects that I can cover and touch upon. But yeah, it is an exciting future. I'm looking forward to it. And
yes. Thank you. We have Mr. Rob and as well as Mr. Brian. Definitely, they're going to share more on innovative industry. So my question is that even from audience, they are actually asking that how they can develop better ecosystems. What will be the objective of industrializations and innovations, as well as why it is so important, because for developed world and developing world, completely culture and many things is different. But I want to know more from Mr. Rob as well as Mr. Brian. So, Mr. Rob.
Well, if you're talking about building more in a more green fashion, certainly the way to do that is to really learn about the green technologies. You do have to understand that there are a lot of things out there that are really great, but there are a lot of things that are being mispositioned as well. And so you do need to know what the source of the material is, how well it degrades in landfills once it's pulled from the buildings, and how effective it is. And I mean effective in terms of its thermal efficiency, as well as its ability to be installed and hold up over time. So there's a lot of learning that goes into building green and building sustainably. What I see an awful lot though is companies that are going in and they're following the hype of the firms that are bringing forth the technology, and they don't quite recognize that the manufacturing of the materials is something you have to look at, because of the manufacturing.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, if the manufacturing isn't green, it's not really, you're just trading one problem off for another. And particularly with petrochemical substances, there's a real problem with how it degrades once it's removed from the building, road, or whatever. So there's a lot that goes into doing this right. I'm a little worried that whenever we rush towards a green alternative, at least here in the United States, we tend to do a lot of things that look good, but we really haven't thought through very deeply. And I'm hoping this time that as we move towards yet another green wave, we're doing our homework and we're not, replacing one problem with another.
Well, actually, if I could, Rob, don't you think that's one of the opportunities that Buttigieg would have as the Secretary of Transportation? Because I mean, quite frankly, most people don't realize here in the United States, the Department of Transportation, through what they fund and what they don't fund, has a dramatic impact on what actually gets built and what across the spectrum. You name it, every single facet of your life, and more importantly, it affects trends in other countries. And so, don't you think? I mean, picking up what Alex mentioned earlier, that we now are in a position where we can begin to rethink, not just replace for replacements for sake, but to rethink and replace. And don't you think, Rob, that given that, let me just try this. From your point of view, let me ask to begin with, do you think that the Biden administration is going to be more expansionary and activist in its role as it approaches reinvestment in infrastructure for the next 4 years?
Well, it certainly will. I mean, compared to the Trump administration, almost anything would be more.
Right.
But the
Yes.
I mean, you go across the board. A lot of the initiatives that were in place under the Obama administration were killed by the Trump administration, and that's really not good progress. But let's take something like electric cars. The entire world is moving to electric cars, but electric cars have a series of very serious problems. One, they consume a lot of energy.
Mining.
And another is the batteries. The lithium-ion batteries aren't green in manufacturing. They're not green in disposal. Now we've got solid-state batteries coming, which is better, and there's an awful lot of work going into creating semiconductors that can degrade once they're disposed of, but they're not in market yet. And so with green cars, we particularly have to look at the energy generation problem, because right now estimates are if we have more than 2 green cars per block, we're going to overconsume. I mean, in other words, the electrical capacity in the United States won't handle the load. And our overload plants are almost all oil fired, which is not, and they're not particularly green. So we really have to think about this from a grounds up change. Electric cars can be, I drive an electric car myself, that they can be greener, but you have to think across the entire ecosystem and fix the problems that aren't green. So you're not, as they say, trading one problem for another. I am very concerned about the amount of lithium ion we're putting into landfills right now. We've got fires going off in the landfill we've got near me. We've got nightly fires going off now as these batteries short out and combust. And that's just one of a number of problems with this stuff getting dumped into landfill. So my hope is the Biden administration will really think through the ecosystem, and we won't have something like we had with the Carter administration, where we had kind of a false start with solar, blew it all up, and an awful lot of people not only lost money, but we set back solar and battery technology yet another decade. And we need to keep moving this time, not have these stops and starts that just mess everything up.
Well, Rob, collaboration. Sorry, Brian.
No, of
yes,
course.
Mr. Brian.
On Rob's note specifically about self-driving cars, especially electric cars. As a Tesla driver myself, I'm pretty passionate about this. But one of the things that's really interesting is that moving forward, there are companies like Pegasus, for example, who are decommissioning over 50 coal power plants and replacing them with 50 massive solar facilities. They're also helping to build solar facilities in Europe as well. And one of the things to remember, and Rob, I agree with you completely on some of the challenges that we're facing, Dr. William and Alex, I think you guys brought up some very interesting points. We need to keep in mind that this COVID phenomenon is not just going to go away with the vaccines. This is going to be a 2 to 5 year process, which means if we look at transportation usage over the past, call it 7-8 months, compared to previous years, it has plummeted significantly. The way that people are living their lives is changing, and realistically, we're not going back to a pre-COVID world anytime soon. And so what I wonder about are all the technologies that are being used in industrial innovation to increase the efficacy of employees while they're living from home. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is the rise of augmented reality. Now, we've seen a couple false starts already with Magic Leap, with Google Glass even, and of course with Snapchat, they attempted to build out augmented reality headsets as well. What's really interesting to me, though, is what some of these new companies are doing with Facebook and Apple. And there's a couple other companies that are jumping to the space. Now, if you guys recall, Steve Jobs claimed before he died that he has an innovation coming that's going to completely replace television. It's going to completely upgrade it. And we're seeing that in the work that Apple is doing. We're seeing that finally, after 10 years and billions of dollars, coming into fruition. And where Apple is different from Magic Leap is Magic Leap spent $3 billion trying to build this technology from scratch, with no stores, with no places for people to come to actually try on their headsets. It's starting from a standing start and trying to get into sprint mode. Whereas Apple has all of this infrastructure. They know how to sell consumer products. They have entire 650 stores where people can come in and try things on, and they can do it one step at a time. So what we saw this week with the launch of the headset is, I think, really interesting, and I think we need to pay attention to, because it is the first step on adding their augmented reality headsets that they've been working on for the past several years, for the past 10 years, really. Because it enables people, it gives a number of sensors to Apple, it gives them a chance to actually try on these additional gear. And of course, Facebook is also working on this as well. Both of these companies are working on building digital twins of the world, which means that if you're out and about, you'll see the world in front of you, and you'll be able to add whatever you need to. If you're in your home, you can put a big screen TV on your empty wall. While you're watching a concert, instead of actually going into that concert, you can have these, there's really interesting work that they're doing where they have performers perform under a dome with hundreds of video cameras and speakers and microphones as well, so that you can actually have the band in your living room. And you can walk in between the band and see every part of them, and you can actually hear them in a really interesting spatial dynamics. Now, what does this mean for the professional world? Well, this technology, even though it's being put out initially for entertainment, has massive ramifications for people working from home. Being able to have a digital twin of an office, be able to put on their headset and be able to virtually walk through and open an office, walk into somebody else's office, be able to shake hands with someone, theoretically, not actually touching their hands, but actually interact with them, seeing their whole body, seeing their facial expression, seeing their body language, which is really the next step of this working from home mindset on Zoom and StreamYard, being able to see each other. I think that's going to be really interesting. It's going to have profound implications for the way that we live our lives, for the way that we interact with coworkers moving forward over the next 5 years or so.
Yes, like already in World Talent Economy Forum, like company like Sansar and this kind of companies from Silicon Valley, they joins with their virtual reality and augmented reality, and we observe, and this is really improvement, like for the next few years. But there is more important things. I think policy and other thing. Our audience, they want to know more about what will be the innovative industry policy, specifically from the policymakers and the government, and how they can support in this better ecosystem. Let's say in Malaysia we have Cyberja. Cyberja actually support by the government, even Malaysian Global Innovation and Creativity Center, MDEC. So we want to know more about Europe, Americans, and other countries' context. That, yes.
Well, I can tell you right now, because and I'm not necessarily. I hope I'm feeding a live horse rather than beating a dead one. And that is simply to say this: the idea of remote collaboration. In the past, there's always been a barrier to international trade and free trade and companies getting together. But with the advancement in remote collaboration, because as I was just thinking about it, Rob. That barrier is gone for smaller companies, and that initial barrier or the cost to get into, that is that economic barrier to get into in order to meet and network with other individuals from around the globe, maybe Malaysia, India, has also dropped precipitously. And so that cost is down, which would suggest to me right off the bat, I can tell you two things that American policymakers in both countries, or all countries, should be doing. They should be looking to fortify that infrastructure. Here, we've heard about, and they're rolling out the advent of 5G technology. But to the extent that developing nations can, as they grow and recover from this COVID-induced recession, to the extent that their future dollars can be leveraged to connect them to the internet in a 5G manner, that would do wonders for unleashing the creative talents of their people and assisting their businesses in business-to-business collaborations across international borders.
Okay, Mr. Alex.
Yes, I'd like to add. So I know that we have these conversations and we have viewers. I'd recommend some of our viewers, hopefully, to get a notepad and a paper. When you hear us talking about some of these keywords, maybe write them down and do some Google searches, because again, there's a lot of career opportunity, because to be a part of this transition towards technology for job security, to incorporate what you learn from this show. So we do incorporate a lot of good information in this. So keyword searches are wonderful. So we already have our society. So big truck, doesn't look electric, doesn't sound electric. So we need to like retrofit and upgrade a lot of our existing infrastructure. And I know like 5-10 years ago, people just felt really overwhelmed. How are we going to completely change the electrical grid? And, you know, we have the ocean rising and we're living in hurricane prone regions. So we can't just start over or start from scratch. We already have our infrastructure set up. So we have to do retrofits and changes. And that's what we're seeing in buildings, like Rob mentioned. So it is good to know where products are coming from. And that goes back to how we vote with our money. One of the things that I'd like to add when it comes to buildings, homes, offices, which is really cool. And I'm using it on one of my projects, and it has to do with insulation. I feel we could apply this type of insulation to refrigerators, freezers, homes, office buildings, maybe even cars, just to make everything more efficient. So NASA has designed a lot of stuff in the past that we've used. Mylar blankets is a good example. A lot of technologies we incorporate in our society. So they actually invented a microscopic porcelain bead. So it's these little tiny beads that are hollow on the inside, and you mix it with paint, and when you paint it on a wall, all of the beads suck in closer next to each other as the paint dries and shrinks, and it changes the R value of a paint to like a higher R value. It's really cool. There's controversial information regarding which R value, so I'm not going to say that, but it also helps with convection. So it's a really cool technology that I wish we would use more of. Hempcrete is something else that I wish we used more of. Permeable concrete is something I wish we did around the world, because we're continuing to just like line or layer the whole world with concrete, and that's why we're seeing a lot of flooding. We saw a lot of flooding in Houston, Texas. So if we used permeable concrete for the sidewalks, some of the roads, some of the planters or whatever, the water actually goes through it and it goes back into the ground and it doesn't flood areas. So I think that's a really cool thing that we should be taking advantage of. Personally, I have a drone. I've used VR technology and attached a drone. I have VR goggles, and I've used that to raise awareness in disaster areas after I cover hurricanes and major disasters around the world, so people can get the real version, the better experience, to hopefully direct more help and resources to the people affected. I loved what, I can't see his name on the screen. Gentleman referring to the entertainment and the technology. So not only did it start off with, I apologize. Not only did it start off with entertainment, and we could use that for industry, but we could use that for news, that real life experience, because news is really important, especially when we continue to see more disasters around the world. I wanted to mention that around the world, we do need to start replacing, especially here in America, a lot of the roads and bridges and the dams. So I hope that we start incorporating new technologies and long-term solutions that continues to save lives and keep people out of danger. The Hyperloop is another really cool thing that has to do with technology, lowering our individual carbon footprint and transportation. I hope they're able to adapt with the 6-foot distance and this time of the pandemic, and we can continue to make progress with the Hyperloop, because I think that's going to be a huge step in the right direction. Yeah,
Dr.
go ahead, William.
Yes.
Thank you. Listen,
Brian and Rob.
I just wanted to add one thing, because I saw some of the questions come up from our audience, and that is we're focusing. They had, rightfully so, questions about industrialization. And I'm not necessarily sure that's the correct word that we should be using, because industrialization actually represented the fact that we moved from an agricultural-based kind of system or economic system or societal organization into one that involved factories and things of that nature. I think what we ought to be thinking about is modernization. And so it could be smart modernization, because we're not necessarily talking about a change in our world economy or the opportunities of the future, moving from one kind of course of production into an entirely different static model. Rather, we're seeing the breakup and the decentralization of both creativity and human capital to attack problems. And that fundamentally is one of the rethink and redesign opportunities of infrastructure development. So it's not infrastructure for the purpose of further industrialization. It's infrastructure for the purpose of liberation of a decentralized, collaborative approach to the modern world. And I do want to just highlight one other thing that Alex said, and that is simply this, that when you turn around, the opportunities moving forward in the future for developing nations, I should say, is immense, because when you start thinking in those terms, that the decentralization, that you can work from home in combination with the AI that Brian is talking about, the opportunities are immense. Essentially, in any area that you might think that your idea will contribute to moving any policy along, you have instant connectivity. You're no longer bound by silos that traditionally hampered the kind of progress, and these days progress moves faster. So it really is an exciting world, but it's not one that's moving, say, from farm to factory. Rather, I think we're moving from factory to freedom. But don't mind me. Just seems to me.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll make this short. I loved what William said, and I think he's absolutely right. Now, there are the big three, right? We already talked about artificial intelligence and augmented reality. The third biggest innovative technology that we need to talk about in industrial innovation, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about blockchain with Bitcoin hitting all-time highs, with the blockchain companies rolling out very useful technologies in a variety of industries that can streamline the business processes, that provide that decentralization that William talked about, that enable disparate parties to work together much more effectively with smart contracts that keep everybody honest and make sure that there are immutable ways of understanding what are the decisions that were made and the transactions that were made. We're really going to a brave new world with these new technologies. And when you think of, and you asked the question around the policies around these. Policies are important. The Biden administration is going to have radically different policies than the Trump administration. A lot of environments in a much more tech-friendly way, which is, I think, amazing. But at the end of the day, I don't think policies drive innovation. I think policies come afterwards. They're a lagging indicator. After the technology companies build things out and they're adopted widely by society, that's when finally governments catch up and say, hey, maybe we should have some policies around this to govern the uses and the way that populations and companies interact with these new technologies. And so it's
very good point,
I think, for there to be a scientific way of adding these policies. There needs to be a voice for technology within governments, whether it's in the United States or Malaysia. I just spoke at the European Commission this morning. I think it's important for tech-literate folks to convey the important information so that governments can actually have the right policies that actually help move things forward and set good rules for the road, rather than stifle innovation or come down with a hard hammer that pushes things back by years or decades.
One point, like example, in Asia Pacific, they are more on government centric, like China example. Even in Malaysian government actually build up this ecosystem, Cyberja, Mahathir bin Mohamad. So I think, yes, for US context, this is okay. US is more open economy, and they have more innovators. And I'm sure that China, and what your observation is specifically like Asia Pacific, definitely you have experience from here. It's like China, even Malaysia, what I'm observed that government actually support a lot for developing this ecosystem. So that's why I think this kind of country actually policy is important. Even though, example, I'm sure that India, even different kind of developing nations, like they also government support a lot, and they also invest a lot of money for startup and this kind of things. So this is one of the different cultural things. So we can make
That's
something. Yes, yes, Mr. Rob. And we have our Professor Donald as well. Yes, what do you want to add?
Well, looking at the looking at the overall trends, one of the difficulties I think we've got in looking at some of the technology as it's applied to emerging environments is that we've got a massive shortage of skills right now. And William was pointing out, Dr. William was pointing out that it's not necessarily an industrial revolution, it's an automation revolution, but that kind of was what the industrial revolution is. And some of my peers call this the fifth industrial revolution that we're currently involved in. And it's going to be disruptive because we're going to take an awful lot of jobs that are currently in place and we're going to obsolescence them, but we're going to create a lot, at least most of the projections, a lot more jobs in critical areas, whether it be chemical, artificial intelligence, manufacturing, even transportation. We're doing amazing things with flying vehicles at the moment on top of autonomy. But that requires new skills, new folks. And sadly, in emerging countries, we often don't get the development of those skills as we should. And it's those skills that will drive those countries into economic success. If a country doesn't provide internet connectivity to its people, about 1/3 of the folks out there are not yet connected to the internet. We need to fix that. We need to get training out. And one nice thing about this pandemic, if there is something nice, is the fact we're really learning how to do remote education, and that means you can scale it. The problem historically has been, how do you get instructors into some of these areas? How do you get the teachers trained? How do you protect them once they're in place? But if you can connect the people and provide the training virtually as opposed to in person, then you can have classrooms that are massive. One teacher could handle or at least talk to thousands of people as opposed to tens of people. And you get the kind of scaling and capability that an emerging country needs to educate its population and maybe allow them to participate and compete better on the world market. And here's the nice thing is you don't really have to relocate them anymore. They could actually do a lot of these jobs from where they are with the low cost living where they exist and bring that money into their communities and then raise those communities up so they're in much better shape. It's kind of a rising tide that raises all boats. And we're at that point where we have the capability. We just need to think through how we're going to apply it. We could fix this.
Actually, on that point, Rob, you're absolutely correct, because when you start talking about it, not only are the people no longer intellectually landlocked, that is to say, in any particular place in the world, but that just means that our universities here in the United States are also unlocked across the globe. And so whereas before major universities or universities with specialties were out of reach to the vast majority of people across the globe, now everywhere people are competing for the best and the brightest talent from across the globe. And as you lower the cost of the barriers to entry, then you are just really exponentially expanding the group. And I can't, I was once when I was in the process of getting my MBA, one of our first year case studies, as I'm sure everybody will know, is the case study of Airvan, where all you want to do is you want to have a low cost, a high quality delivered to the most number of people. And absolutely, the remote collaboration, online education opens up all the universities across the world. And so therefore, for policymakers in the developing nations, you're absolutely right. Focusing in on infrastructure and connectivity to the internet, which is the one, I'd say, spinal cord or central nervous system that you need for your country. And that will allow you to leapfrog economically in terms of the development for the future. And, I don't know where the jobs are necessarily going to be. And I don't think anybody can. Excuse my language. I didn't know where half the jobs today were, what they were 5 years ago, where they came from. But I do know this, that the more we unleash the barriers, and the more that we create opportunities internationally and are no longer landlocked or intellectually locked in any way, shape, or form, you will see the returns quite quickly. Because smart people like Alex and Rob and Donald and Bryant, you guys are going to run amok. I'll just be stuck here, all by myself in a library.
We already run amok.
I absolutely love what William said. And Rob, thank you so much for bringing remote education up. Because that's the critical thing. That's actually what we do, not to plug Ahura, but that's exactly what we invented. Technology that enables people to learn 3 to 5 times faster than traditional education. And we focus it specifically on adult learners who are being impacted by the Industrial Revolution. They're being replaced by automation and artificial intelligence, and they need to retrain for new jobs. And the developing world is a critical component of this. So for every license that we sell to corporates, we actually give away free licenses to members of underserved communities globally to enable them to access to the learning that's necessary so that they can get these jobs that will enable them to work remotely, bring money into their communities, and grow those communities from the inside. We're also in negotiations with a number of countries to roll out this technology across their entire populations to enable them to catch up to the first world from a perspective of technology and understanding, programming, coding, understanding of technology, and understanding of computers. I think this is an absolute critical part of industrial innovation. And now I do feel bad because Donald hasn't spoken at all, so I'm going to step back so he can.
Thank you. Professor Donald. Yeah.
Well, I evolved during my life from being a very much basically economic belief in economics, like some of our colleagues on this show have talked about, which is the idea that you really don't want governments to get involved in anything because they're going to destroy innovation. They're going to come up with policies. And as I started studying sociology at Stanford and Columbia and really started looking into it, there's a branch called economic sociology, which kind of merges economics and sociology, and that's what I got involved in. And I came to realize that nothing that we do isn't done without help from others. So, and what happened in Silicon Valley, which I've studied and written about, is that it was kind of accident. It was an accident of fate, because the Vietnam War happened at the exact right time and when I first got to Silicon Valley when I was a kid, you could look out, you drive down 101, the freeway, and there were like fields of tanks, or basically military vehicles, because there was a company called FMC, which was one, the initials, they changed it to the initials from its name because the name didn't make any sense anymore. That stands for Food Machinery Corporation. And what they didn't make food machinery, they made armored vehicles for Vietnam. And Grumman was there, Lockheed was there, many of the big defense contractors were there. So out in Sunnyvale now, which is there was a place I was taking dance lessons, and it was a fabulous place for dance lessons because it was this big building with a wood floor, and they used to build jets there. And now all of this is turning into housing. It's all changed. But the venture capital industry was developed in Silicon Valley. I mean, it sort of existed, but it became, and you can drive down streets in Silicon Valley and just see giant 10-story law firm after 10-story law firm after 10-story law firm who are absolute experts at being able to create companies, to take them public, to protect intellectual property on a global basis, and so on like that. And that all just evolved because of luck, basically. When I was a kid driving from Carmel Valley to San Francisco, when I was little, before Silicon Valley really happened, it was so boring because it was nothing but fruit trees. It's fruit trees, miles and miles and miles of fruit trees. And they called it the Valley of Heart's Delight, because the fruit was so fabulous, and very few fruit trees anymore, sadly. But it's replaced with something wonderful. So I love Silicon Valley. But my point is that that kind of evolution, there's luck. I mean, luck is a huge factor in it. It's a random luck thing that happened. And all over the world, people are trying to copy Silicon Valley, but you can't, it's just so big. There's just so many trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of infrastructure there, literally trillions. And you can't start from, it's not easy to start from scratch. However, I've also work closely with a research institution in Finland. And what we study there is persuasive technology. And it's in the town of Oulu, which is about a 7-hour drive north of Helsinki. And it's about 2 hours south of the Arctic Circle. So it's wonderful in the summer. The sun doesn't go down, but in the winter, it's a little gloomy. And they, on purpose, took this town, which was old town, like 500 years old, and they made pitch. That's what they sold, is pitch for boats. They have a lot of trees, so they took the pitch from the trees, and some people got very rich doing it, and it sustained this town. And they decided, when the cell phone came around, they bought the patents from the United States military and commercialized it. So that's where, and they decided that because Russia was collapsing right at the end of the Soviet Union, they realized that there was going to be a whole bunch of programmers, very excellent engineers, who were going to be out of work because the Soviet Union wasn't going to be able to sustain what they'd been doing. And so they hired them. They got a bunch of Russians over. They built a University of Oulu, where I've got my advanced degrees from. And just basically turned the town into the research and development headquarters for Nokia, which was by far its biggest industry there. And so they had a whole system where they had a university, and the university doesn't have sociology classes. It's only technical stuff. I mean, it has a few little classes like that, but they said in Finland it's so small that what they do is they make each university have a purpose. So they can't have, universities can't have general, because it's just too small. So if I wanted to take sociology, I think I'd go to Jyväskylä or Helsinki or someplace like that. But on purpose, what they did is they built this infrastructure so that they could develop the people to do the work that they wanted to do in the research and development headquarters for Nokia, and that sustained this area very well. People got some people, and Polar is there. The heart rate monitor company is there, and a couple of other companies are there. So it's possible for governments to actually go in and deliberately create a structure. And I want to say one other thing is, in the time that I have been working with them, that I think I helped them understand the importance of diversity. And so when I teach at the University of Oulu, my students are from Spain and Hong Kong and all over the world. They deliberately create relations with people all over the world so that they can get innovation. And they actually teach innovation. And we're going to have, you and I, Sharif, are going to talk to a professor of innovation there who started innovation hubs in several countries. And I'm going to bring him in to help us. And so it's possible to do. And I want to say I think it's useful looking at the models of Finland, because they've actually, so the rest of the story is they blew it by having Nokia be research and development be way up there in the middle of nowhere, because they weren't getting the good random input that they need. In Silicon Valley, a huge portion of it is the serendipity, where you just meet somebody from some other country just randomly at a meetup or something like that, and you get talking to them, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, you could help each other in this way and make something new. So Finland got so monocultured that it was all these Finns out there in the middle of nowhere, and they made these decisions about how Nokia was going to proceed by selling cheap phones to China. And then the modern phones came along and Nokia didn't have any involvement. Then they realized they did the wrong thing and they moved their research and development to Silicon Valley, but by then it was too late. So go ahead, William. I've been talking forever. Yes. So
no. I mean, I'm glad, Donald. I guess it occurred to me that you raised an interesting notion, and that is this: at a policy level, in addition to investing in 5G technologies, and I'm going to mention one more thing, and then I want to throw it back to the panel, and that is this: that it seems to me that policymakers, while they cannot engineer luck and timing and who happens to be at the right party, what they can do is they can engineer, say, something that we have often referred to here in the United States as the GI Bill. Or what I would suggest is a twofold thing. It would be, say, a COVID dividend that they could invest in a general investment, a GI for their citizens, in which they invest in their educational things so that they can then attend all these universities, including the specialized ones in Finland that apparently, had problems in the past with diversification. But it seems to me that there ought to be, and I think there will be, a COVID dividend from because once we start to figure out the financial costs and everything else and then redirect our monies, that'll be a COVID dividend. But more importantly, it should, at a policy level, you can't engineer luck and you can't engineer being at the right place at the right time, but you can engineer, as a policymaker, putting people in the right vicinity, and the right vicinity is in the educational institutions across the world where Maybe they will. Maybe it's like love. You see the girl and you hit on her, and maybe it works out. I don't know, but I know that you got to be at the right place at the right time. Rob, Brian, what do you guys think of the GI investment with the COVID dividend?
I agree. I will say that what happened is that in Finland is that they realized when Nokia went south that they had to do something. And so they created these basically processes for innovation and took ex-Nokia people and started bazillions of little companies and became one of the fastest growing economies in anywhere by doing that. So it was a deliberate policy thing that they did. And realizing the problems with diversity, they incorporated lots of diversity to try and increase the serendipity that they have. I'm talking, but I want to say one other thing, which is that I put a link in the chat thing here, and I can tell it to everyone, but you can basically Google it. Look, this is from MIT, an article from MIT from Education Week. And it turns out that online training is more effective for adults. It's not that effective for K-12. And the biggest problem with K-12 is there's too many distractions. And what happens is somebody's a very, very good student that's dedicated to doing it. They can do well, but the students that really need help, the kind of things that good teachers actually can do by interacting with them, they fall farther behind. And it's not. I think that things like what you're doing with. I don't exactly know how you're doing it, but many of the educational systems are basically taking the stuff that we do in regular classrooms and then translating that to Zoom or whatever. But
not working well.
Yeah, and I think Brian is, what their company is doing is just kind of reinventing how you learn, because the way that you do it could be fun. You can gamify it and do all these wonderful things. And I will say again that Finland has been incredibly progressive with their K-12 system. Like when I was in kindergarten, first grade or third grade, we had math, then we have English, then we'd have history. They don't do that anymore. It's just one subject, and for years they've been playing games. Like they teach math by setting up a store and having people make change and keep their books and all this kind of stuff, and just because it's fun, and they learn about how to start a business and all these wonderful things, and they learn math, and those are the kind of changes that have to happen for education, and they're nascent. We haven't really, people like Brian are doing the work that we need to really make that change.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rob. What do you want to add? As well as I'm sure that Mr. Brian and Alex has different things to share with our audience.
Well, I'll be really brief because Brian have to have a chance to kick in here. But we're right now at the phase where we've developed a lot of technology very quickly, but we still have the old mindset, and that's something we have to get over. As Donald pointed out, we've got online school classes that are taught using in-person techniques, which really weren't all that great in person, and they really suck. Technical term when you try to do it virtually. So and then. Where colleges and universities are still thinking, well, we have to get people on campus and we're contained. Really not anymore. You can reach out any place in the world, and the people don't actually have to show up on campus. And so while you might not make as much revenue per student, you can have a ton more students and you can reach more people. We've got to finish this particular path and now start thinking about these processes very differently, because our tools have changed, our students have changed, and our needs have changed.
Mr. Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate everything the panelists have been saying. Donald, you're absolutely right in a lot of the things that you raised. Rob, you're absolutely right about the changing requirements in education. And I think at the end of the day, personalization is the key here. And so that's part of the reason we use artificial intelligence to figure out in any given moment what are the needs of that individual based on everything from their facial expressions and their eye tracking and their fidget score to their tone of voice, the words that they use, the last fight they had with their significant other, their heart rate, their stress rate, activity level, and sleep patterns. We're able to pinpoint what is the optimal way to deliver educational content to an individual using artificial intelligence so that they're going to pay the closest attention, learn that information, and retain it much longer. And we're going to see this paradigm go into every field, because as artificial intelligence becomes even more prevalent, as the cost of sensors go down, we enter the Cambrian explosions of sensors and IoT, we'll be able to collect more and more information, analyze that information more deeply, and provide a hyper-personalized approach to everyone's life, whether it has to do with diet, exercise, whether it has to do with industrial innovation in the workplace or learning, or really anything else. And I think this is going to be a really fascinating time period to be alive, because we're going to see a massive increase in effectiveness of every individual in all elements of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Yes, Mr. Alex.
To touch upon what Brian just mentioned, there's that new documentary that talks about Facebook and social media. Is it called The Social Experiment or Social Experience or something? Really good documentary. It covers a lot of the stuff Brian just mentioned. It just talks about how they're marketing to us through social media and our connection and interaction and all of that. So Donald and I, we both live in Santa Cruz, and it is right next to Silicon Valley. I know some of the viewers may have heard of Silicon Valley throughout their life. It's the technology hub. There's a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs and large corporations and everything. So I just made a list of the ones that I've actually driven past and seen right here, 30 miles from where I'm at. Well, maybe 25 from where I'm at. So you drive through there to take care of errands. So I've seen SanDisk, which is a large international company. I've seen Google, the Google facilities over there. I've seen Apple, it's over there. I've driven past the eBay logo, that's over there. There's the main Facebook facility is a little bit further, but still in Silicon Valley. There's some Tesla locations. I've driven past the PayPal, big building, and I think there's probably Amazon. So it's like those are some of the biggest companies, around the world, and it's right, really close to where I'm at. So it's interesting living that close to it. So I wanted to answer one of the questions that I saw in the comments. Why is it so important for industrial innovation and infrastructure? So to answer this, to summarize this, I think it has to do with the quality of life of the people in that country, for safety, for security, for health, for wellness, for eating healthy, for knowledge, for education, for financial income, just job security, mainly quality of life. I think innovation and technology allows us to get to that point. Unfortunately, there's a dark side to technology, and that is if you live in one of the countries or the developing countries where there's exploitation of child labor, there's harsh working conditions, people are exposed to chemicals, places like Ghana that then they're left over with the recycled material and breaking apart all the electronics without the proper protective equipment and the safety protocols to keep them not exposed to that. And of course, we need better recycling when it comes to not only the lithium batteries, as we continue to see more cars, but just better recycling in general. Thankfully, technology is helping us.
I have to leave. You guys continue the conversation. I have another call. I will talk to you.
Okay. You can give your concluding remarks for today. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Yes. Mr. Alex.
So technology, again, with finding out ways to recycle plastic, to upcycle some of the things that we have, I think technology is really going to help us in those aspects. But again, it has to do with our morals and what we know is right and all the environmental impact of the whole process, like Rob was talking about. Elon Musk is trying to make internet available worldwide through satellites. And if we can, again, summarize all of this innovation around the world for developing countries, I think that internet and universal internet is just so important. It'll allow a country and its citizens to progress with industry, with innovation, with technology, with the career. And again, like William was saying, it has an exponential effect on the local economy. When you build a better infrastructure, better roads, better grid, more efficient internet, it makes the whole city more efficient, and it accelerates the economy, the jobs, and usually the quality of life of that specific country. I do want to mention one of my friends, Richard. He's in Uganda. He would have loved to join the show. He is almost complete. He's almost completed his degree in environmental science. He's always on the radio talking about environmentalism. He's really knowledgeable. He participates in my environmental Facebook group. Unfortunately, his internet's so horrible, and he can't even join the video. I could barely even talk to him over the phone, through the connectivity. So terrible. So it does limit a lot of people in developing countries from participating in this education platform. And so again, smartphones, I think, is one of the best, craziest thing that we've ever created. We have so much information, knowledge, access to the worldwide internet, all of these apps, and we could use cell phones or smartphones, specifically smartphones, to really educate ourselves in all of this, all these subjects we're talking about. And I think if everyone in the world or certain countries had smartphones and good internet, it would really expedite our transition towards a really good, efficient infrastructure. So I haven't heard robotics that often here, but we are starting to see more robots lifting boxes, moving stuff, the robot dogs. There's even warehouses that are now moving around boxes from the location, similar to like an Amazon warehouse. And it's all automated, the whole system. Just the technology is replacing people's jobs. And unfortunately, it may be increasing the divide between the rich and the poor, because the people creating these things in this technology are possibly or likely or more than likely making more money than the so again, there's that. We also didn't really touch upon 3D printers. That's another on top of nanotechnology and AI and all this other stuff. 3D printers are a new technology that will likely help us build better bridges, faster houses, and other things that we're creating with concrete and plastics and medical advancements. I wanted to say that when it comes to technology and innovation, just like everything in the past, it comes down to like, do we want this? Is it for entertainment? Is it for a pointless reason? Is it for something that's going to sit on our shelf and not serve a purpose? Or are we doing these things to increase the quality of life of all of us, to prevent suffering, to prevent malnutrition, to help women and children in developing countries, to help alleviate the suffering of animals around the world? Are we doing all these things just to buy more things that we want for consumerism? Or are we doing this for a better quality of life for all of us, to make the world a better place? So I think when we think of these things, we have to also take that into consideration. Like what's our end goal? And I guess that has to do with our mindset and our overall shift. I did want to mention, just again, mining is a horrible thing when it comes to technology, and how much fossil fuels goes into creating every single memory chip, every storage space. So yeah, we have to continue to work towards how we're powering the system, where we're mining resources, and hopefully come up with better recycling techniques, so we do less mining and extractions of Earth's resources, and we can utilize and upcycle our previous technologies. So that's
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. William. Yes.
Okay, listen, I dig everything Alex says, and so I'll just say ditto to that. 1, 2. I just, if I can summarize things this way and kind of get this point across, and that is this: that it's not so much industrialization and the improvement thereon, because we just don't want to improve the mousetrap. We want to make a better one. And so it's from factories to freedom, and the freedom there and the link there is the decentralization. And that decentralization will come when the policymakers, to the extent that what authority and what financial resources they have, which may arise, and I know it sounds a little outrageous right now to say that there will be a COVID dividend, but in fact there will be. But when they take those resources and they grab boldly the notion of connectivity of the citizens of their nations to the rest of the world. Because once they grab hold boldly of that connectivity, it makes everything else possible. It makes the collaboration, the remote collaboration that Rob talked about possible. It makes the idea of a new approach to education that Brian was talking about, it makes that possible. It makes access to other universities around the world possible. It means people aren't intellectually landlocked anymore. And the key here is the unleashing of the creative mind. And whether it's through the smartphones that Alex is talking about, or any of the other ideas that we've mentioned during this, as well as other programs here at the World Talent Economy Forum, it seems to me at a fundamental level, policymakers can simply do this. Understand that we are not just rebuilding, but we're rethinking, remaking how we're going to rebuild, and how we rebuild is going to be based on some fundamental things. One, the smart investment of our limited resources into those critical areas that we know will produce results. And that's grabbing hold, both hands, however you want to call it, the reins, the horses, the bull by its horns, connectivity. Grab connectivity and leverage connectivity for your citizens. And then, as Rob said earlier, they'll just continue to run amok. I'm all in favor of everybody running amok. Let's all have fun and run amok. I'd rather do that, Rob. I do have to say this because I am a big Star Wars fan, and I'm so digging and jealous of the X-Wing fighter that you have behind you, Rob. And the behind you almost looks like that's the shooting the ship position from below the Millennium Falcon. No, because you've got the chair, you've got the monitor, and it looks like that you're looking right out. And I don't even know if that's a Death Star in the back. I don't know how far you carried it, but I do want to say that I'm jealous of that X-Wing painting.
You don't like my background? What about mine?
Okay, thank you. So everything good, Mr. Rob? Yes.
Well, as I assume we're starting to wrap up. One of the things we really have to watch as we move into these new paradigms is collateral damage. So, for instance, almost all the firms I work with are now reporting productivity upticks due to work at home. The collateral damage is work-life balance. People are working longer hours. They're not spending as much time with their families all around them, but strangely enough, they're not spending as much time with them because everybody's now kind of separated into their own little digital world, and they're not engaging as much. And so we certainly are seeing an uptick in divorces. We're seeing an uptick in mental health problems, an uptick in depression, and an uptick, and we're expecting an even bigger one in suicides. That's not good. So as we move to these new paradigms and these new remote working conditions, we do need to increase our focus on work-life balance, on mental health, and on the things that allow people to enjoy life. We don't want to just digitize people and turn them into just a different kind of round peg and a pegboard. We really want to make them happy. We want to make them not only productive but long-lived, and think through the repercussions of what it is we're doing. So we do it right this time, and we don't switch one set of problems for another set of problems.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Professor Donald.
There's two things that just came up that I'd like to address. First, I'd like people to understand that there's basically two kinds of innovation: incremental innovation and disruptive, radical innovation. And Silicon Valley is very good at the radical disruptive innovation. I add to what Alex said, Intel and Hewlett-Packard are also there. Hewlett-Packard is one of the primary drivers of the success of Silicon Valley. The other thing that's important is that on purpose, Stanford University merged as much as it could with the business community. So if a person from the business community, I don't know if it's true anymore, but for many, many years, a person from the business community could go to Stanford for 10 cents on the dollar. So they deliberately built business infrastructure, merged it with the Stanford campus. And the reason I'm pointing that out is going back to the serendipity thing. And that's really becoming a huge problem right now on the internet. It's all fine that you can do keyword searches and look up Google videos, but what people are doing is they're, first off, videos are not a very good way of learning because they don't tell you the source of what they're telling you usually. And when I read something, I read an article, I am skeptical immediately. And so I go to, if somebody says there's an increase in suicide, I go and I look at Lancet, Nature, Journal of the American Medical Association, and go right across the board. And right now, it turns out that actually hasn't been happening, but I agree that it's a strong potential for it to happen because of the mental health problems. But back to what I was just saying is that it's very, very easy to get incorrect information. And what's happening is that the internet is dividing into these places where people literally have different realities, because most of what we interact with is basically imaginary. Like, I'm imagining you, I'm imagining Malaysia. I've never been to Malaysia. I know Malaysia exists, but everything I know about Malaysia, I've had to cobble together from different pieces of information and then imagine what Malaysia really is like. And what's going on now is that people are getting into these literally different worlds where when they try and talk to each other, they simply can't communicate. So how is it that we're going to create the serendipity that's necessary? It's absolutely been shown that people advance in corporations by being in the right place at the right time. It's not merit.
Yeah, okay, but Donald, listen, seriously, isn't that just a function of because that's the way it's always been done, and that we're actually entering a brand new, brave world where we don't have the evidence simply because it hasn't been done this way? And so it's a bit of a misnomer and a little disingenuous to say, well, it's only because we have all this history in the past that everybody in corporate America has gotten to meet each other and everything else in the old ways because that was the only way they ever did it. We don't even have any of the empirical evidence that suggests that this new way of collaboration, remote collaboration across international borders, won't have the same substantive effect, if not more so, emphasized by the fact that I'm now able to talk to people from across the globe, either in Malaysia or India or the UK, places that I would not normally have had the ability to exchange ideas with had I just been, say, here in Washington, D.C. at a corporation, or say in Silicon Valley in one of the law firms there, or say in New York at one of the financial institutions. So it just seems to me a bit premature to say that all the history and evidence suggests that this is the only way that's the most effective, when we are at the beginning precipice of this whole notion of building an entirely new structure where we will see what the gains are, so that we shouldn't be held hostage by that which we're bound by simply because that was our only experience from the past.
Well, I want to point out that it isn't the corporate silos that make Silicon Valley successful. It's its bars. And it's meeting somebody random that you would have no way of meeting before. And we're in a silo too. We're here because we're very well educated in these particular topics, and it's not necessarily accessible to everyone to be able to do this. And I agree that that meetups are trying to change their structure where they're be able to have meetups by Zoom and things like that. And I think that's important. We've really got to figure out how to build the serendipity into the system, because the opposite is happening right now.
See, look, I just have a fundamental disagreement with that, only because I think that what you're doing is, I think part of your structure is still calcified in the sense that you're still looking at it from the viewpoint of how you have been looking at it. I, on the other hand, looking at how our kids, connecting these days, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, even the teenagers, how they're collecting in the areas that are most important to them. Whether they are looking for music, whether they're looking for love, or they're just looking to hook up. They've got TikTok, they've got Snapchat, they've got WhatsApp, they've got all these other things that I don't even know about. and they are working fine in their community. And so under your theory would be that because these kids don't have bars anymore, that somehow they're not pursuing their love life. Well, it seems to me that I know these kids are out there and they got all these dates and they're doing just fine that way, utilizing the new technology. They are utilizing the technology in a way to make their fundamental connections that they need to make to satisfy whatever their issues are. And once they turn their attention to business or they turn into education, they'll still be using all of these tools in ways that we have not even thought of. And so it's disingenuous for us to say, well, we've got to do all this other stuff because that's the way it's always been. And that's the only way that we know. You're right. That's the only way that we know. But it's not the way that they have learned. And they are learning and creating an entirely different structure as of right now. And I know Alex wants to jump in. Alex, please. I know this is your wheelhouse. I'm just trying to defend your area here, buddy. Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we always
Okay.
have ideas, so maybe so in between like what William was saying and Donald was saying, these different apps that we don't even know about. So there's Tinder, you swipe. There should be an app that's like similar to Tinder where you're swiping and you're like, okay, CEO, this person, I want to network with this person. And then you could decide who you want to network with easier because I've met people in business collaborations throughout my community. And a lot of it is just conversations and you have like this cool idea or project that you want to work on. And then it becomes successful. And then I've noticed in Santa Cruz, they're, living here for 30 years, trying to do a lot of projects and get stuff done. I've had a difficult time finding people that follow through, that are solid, that see the vision that I see or continue to be consistent. So I have done a lot of stuff on my own over all the years, just doing a lot of my own projects, my own ideas, and being my own motivator. And I just think that, okay, so my advice for this is don't let people slow you down. Don't always depend on other people. You don't always have to collaborate to get things done. A lot of stuff is just self-motivation, self-education. So we did just touch upon where you get in. Sorry, is there, I'm getting a lot of feedback through someone's computer. If you could turn that down, thank you. So there's different ways we can get information. Donald was saying how he doesn't always trust, a video, and that's true. So we get our information from our peers, from our family, our friends, but there's also a lot of, books and magazines, YouTube videos, documentaries, news sources, different websites. There's statistics. There's a lot of graphs and information and real-time data. There's blogs and there's social media. Unfortunately, some of those are like algorithms, like Facebook. If we click on something that we liked, it's going to continue to show us that stuff. And I think that's continuing to drastically increase the divide between the rich and the poor, right, left, or pro this or, pro that. So we got to be cautious when it comes to social media and how we're getting our information and our algorithm through there. I do want to say that as we continue to, connect with people internationally through video, through innovation and industry, we're like not really, we're kind of overlooking that we have this opportunity to communicate with each other through the universal language of English. And that's really cool because everyone in Silicon Valley and most people around the world are using English. So some of my potential advice, correct me if I'm wrong, would be if you want to get a career or have a really successful career in industry and sustainability, any of these, I think it would be like to have a good smartphone and learn the English language. Because it is universal and it is happening and with a lot of large businesses and industries. And again, thankfully, with smartphone technology and innovation and AI and whatever, we now can have conversations with other people that have different languages. It's not 100% accurate yet, and there's, they're still working out some kinks in the system, but it is cool that we can talk with people around the world through technology. I also want to mention another important keyword I wish more people knew about. It's cultural relativism. Just understanding people's view in that area, like I don't know how to define the definition, but when all of their family and friends and their entire culture and everyone in their country believes a certain thing or understands things a certain way or does things a certain way, we have to as we continue to communicate with people internationally, we have to understand cultural relativism when it comes to our disagreement and realize that we do have common goals, and most of those are created by the United Nations, which I trust. And I don't know kind of how I think they explain cultural relativism pretty well, and how we can still communicate and be kind to one another and put our differences aside, and definitely put racism aside, and continue to make the world a better place. I did want to mention with resilience and infrastructure how important that is. I don't understand how Japan has been so resilient when they had like the tsunami, they have like all these major storms and hurricanes, and they're constantly going through major disasters, and somehow they're able to recover. I don't understand, because it always seems like I see them on the news for something horrible and then they're recovering. So infrastructure is really important when it comes to economically recovering from a disaster, and it just seems like Japan's doing really well. Now, when these disasters around the world continue to get worse, more frequent, happen simultaneously, innovation and the decisions we're making today are going to help build a stronger, more resilient infrastructure, whether it's stronger power lines, the power lines underground, generator backups, or strong seawalls or pumps to pump out water out of low elevation coastal areas. So there's a lot of ways that we can incorporate innovation into helping protect our countries to become more resilient and helping save lives. That was and my last thing I just wanted to mention, we were talking about, we don't want to how Rob was mentioning, we don't want to sacrifice all of this for our quality of life, to work long hours and not spend time with our family and our friends. Now, I had the chance to travel through a lot of Scandinavian countries, and I think it's Scandinavia where they have the shorter work weeks, but the longer hours. And that's what Google's duplicating. I think where you get like the 3 days off. And one of my friends, he's a nurse, it's a similar concept where you're working more hours in one day. So there's less traveling time, which is more environmental. And then you get more longer days off. And just Google, from what I've heard, what I've read, they have really good working conditions, and that's helping all of the employees be more productive. And I think the working conditions around the world should be overlooked by, watchdog groups and large organizations in the United Nations, because I wish that I knew all the products that I was purchasing wasn't harming people in other countries around the world or supporting bad work conditions and child labor. So it's just difficult, and we got a lot of work to do in all of those aspects. So
yes, thank you, Mr.
that's
Rob.
my input. Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Yes, how do you want to add? Because Dr. Williams, Mr. Alex come up with a different idea on technological developments and other point. What do you want to add in this discussion?
Well, just staying pretty much on the same overall theme, that we need to look at this holistically. We have a tendency to advance in one area and not look into how that area impacts other areas. I do agree that this idea of trying to hold to the past while trying to move to the future tends to be somewhat self-defeating. But in most cases, the problems I run into with regard to deployment and deployment of technology and advancement has to do with the fact that people have not thought through the overall implications of the change and addressed the side issues in a timely fashion. And as a result, a lot of these changes have adverse impacts, or they start and stop pretty horribly. We've been certainly talking earlier about, for instance, the move to virtualized technology. And the problem has always been in the virtualized area, over-promising and under-delivering, and not really thinking through what it is the solution should be and throwing out something less than. And the end result is the population gets frustrated, aggravated, and we push off the involvement and the improvement another 10 years or so, and it becomes a problem. Another example is in the move to electric cars. One of the big problems we failed to address was the batteries. Battery technology had stalled for nearly 100 years, and then suddenly we got behind it. But we are so far behind where we need to be on storage It's not even funny, and it's really having an adverse impact on things like wind farms and solar farms, which don't produce 24/7, yet have to supply power 24/7, and without adequate storage and recovery, they can't fulfill the roles they're being asked to perform. And we're fixing them, but we should have been far ahead of the curve here in terms of addressing some of these things, so the solutions, when they came to market, could address the full problem they were designed to address. Finally, if we look at transportation, one of the big issues we've got now is this idea we're going to switch gas-powered cars to electric cars, and it's not going to end well. The issue is we don't need this many cars. The automobile sits 95% of the time unused. If we're going to move to a greener model, then we probably should be thinking more along the lines of ride sharing, much more aggressive ride sharing. And as we move out autonomous technology, the intermixing of human drivers and autonomous cars is going to be at some point a disaster. The insurance models showcase that one human driver in an otherwise automated freeway can cause far more damage than they can today, because they create cluster accidents, because the automated cars are driving with very high tolerances. So inches apart, you drop a human into that mess and he makes a mistake. Suddenly you're not wrecking one car, you're wrecking 100 cars. So we really need to think about this holistically, or we're just going to have huge stops and starts. Another thing with autonomous cars is every time an autonomous car or an electric car has an accident, it's front page news. But the same thing doesn't happen with gas cars. We're losing well over 60,000 people a year to automotive accidents. We don't report on every one of those, but any electric car or autonomous car that has an accident, that's front page. And so everything's taken out of proportion. So there are a lot of things we need to think through and need to step back and figure out before we rush hell-mel into the future. Because if we don't think about the collateral damage to what it is we're doing, that stuff's going to come back and bite us in the butt. And we won't advance as quickly as we could have as a result, because those problems are going to cause us to pull back prematurely. And technology has to advance linearly. It cannot do this. Yeah, we're going to do this. Okay, that sucks. We'll start over again. Because when that happens, we lose a decade every time. And with global warming, we don't have those decades anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Professor Donald.
Well, I want to start out. I'm going to say what my research is, and what I'm doing right now is using something called sociosemantic networks, which is a way of basically tying social networks to people's culture and their beliefs. And so what I'm showing is that social networks drive people's beliefs, and basically people's beliefs change what social networks that they're involved with. So it's a two-way street. They co-create each other. And when we get together with other people, we're reacting not just to the words or their faces. We're reacting to their smell, their voice tone, very subtle body movements, body language, and how trust is built, sadly, is intuition. People basically decide to trust somebody unconsciously, and then consciously they make excuses on why they did it. So I don't, historically, innovation is innovation is taking something from one social world and using it in another social world. I'd recommend the book by my friend Andrew Hargadon called How Breakthroughs Happen. And he documents a lot of the great breakthroughs that have happened and shown that it was because of the diversity of the group, not because of any person's individual genius. And I know in Silicon Valley that one of the biggest mistakes startup companies make is they get this idea that they can do it all themselves. And it just doesn't work. If somebody is an expert at some sort of technical issue, they're not going to have the time to be experts at financial, and they're not going to be time to be experts at marketing. When I see successful startups, ones that we think, wow, these guys have a real chance, the story is usually two people, a marketing guy met an engineering guy at Stanford, and the two of them decided to drop out of school and start a company. And it's always the person who realizes that he needs a team and can have the leadership to be able to communicate to people have the story of why what they're doing is important, and have people understand that. My research and all the research is showing that is happening less on the internet. I'm not saying that it couldn't happen, and I think that that's a challenge, and I think it's a great challenge. But how we make connections, we can make a friend in the laundromat and just have a whole entire different perspective in our world just because of somebody we met. Every person can teach you something. I've learned things from street people, from homeless people. I've learned things. Every person knows something different than you do. So every person is a resource. And I don't see that happening. I mean, all of the research shows the opposite is happening right now. People are looking for the stuff that makes them feel good. So people won't expand their musical tastes because it's just so easy to find the exact music that's your musical taste. How do you encounter a different kind of music that can change your life? I mean, that's happened to me just by luck. This person's played David Grisman Quintet's first album, and it just blew me away. I mean, it changed my life. And I don't see quite how that's going to happen. In fact, I wrote an article in a business journal that was the danger of the internet all the way back in like 92. And what I said is coming to fruition, unfortunately. I want to also answer one of the questions about innovation, which is the reason that innovation in industrial is important is you've got to have like a backbone to any community. The community I'm living in right now, which is technically part of Silicon Valley because the term Silicon Valley is expanded to include the whole entire San Francisco Bay Area, even though it started in a particular valley. And so it's a very kind of sad place. It gets almost all of its revenue from tourism. So when there's a recession, that's extra money that people spend. And there's a recession, people want to hang on to their money and only use it for complete necessity things. In fact, if you talk the thing about Alex of what you want versus what you need, people who come and visit Santa Cruz are usually doing what they want and not what they need. There's no point to it. And Santa Cruz has deliberately driven out businesses. There's this anti-business hippie attitude, and because of it, a lot of people are marginal around here or commute to Silicon Valley. About a third of the people that work commute over to Silicon Valley, but which is also very destructive on the environment. And so that's why having an industrial base in every town or any place provides the consistent source of income. It takes money from outside and brings it in. So anyway, that's addressing some of the questions, and also something that I've researched and written about for years and years and years, which is about the connections between how random connections actually create, how that makes creativity. And I don't see yet how we're going to do that on the internet because people are doing the opposite. But I mean, I like to find random connections because I know how valuable it is. But most people just want to stay in their comfort zone. They want to stay in their own little world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, we kind of needed a dating app for business people. I guess we do have a Lineable, but it's not really stepping up. We had LinkedIn before, but that's not really introducing us to new people like we thought it was going to do. But certainly in the dating apps, folks are exploring a lot of people pretty regularly. We don't really have something like that yet. I expect it'll evolve. Don't have something like that in the business world, but I agree with Donald. Discovery. Surprisingly enough, you would think the internet with all the connectivity, discovery would be a lot easier. It's really become quite a bit harder because we're overwhelmed with the amount of information. And then we tend to lock in on the stuff that we like and avoid all the stuff that we don't like. And that's particularly problematic in politics. But it is a problem that AI can probably solve. No, I shouldn't say probably solve, that AI can solve. And we're just waiting for somebody to implement it in a way where you get better introductions to people that you should meet, better discovery of things that you should know about, not just the things that you want to know about. It's focusing a bit back on breadth and a little less on where our proclivities certainly are. The internet right now is reinforcing a really bad set of practices, and we do need to fix that. Otherwise, we're going to be, especially in the United States, we're going to be so divided. We're going to split apart, and that would be problematic. We'll have our own form of Brexit in a few years if we don't fix this. So I do agree with Donald. That is a significant problem that needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Dr. William.
Oh no, I'm all good.
Okay. Thank you for today's discussions. I want to go for the concluding remarks. Before that, I just want to add that World Talent Economy Forum, those who joining with us, thank you from core of my heart. And we are trying to reach around 100 million people, not only online. Offline, there is a huge amount of student youth community in developing countries. We will distribute all of your resources. Test and trial basis. From yesterday, we are starting to reach this 100 million people. And I want to share already 112 group where is more than 100 million people active in this group. We are sharing our content and it was successful. And beside that, every day, at least 10 well-established universities, schools, and college we are trying to reach. We are trying to introduce this World Talent Economy Forum content. And hopefully by 2021, we will achieve our target. But we need continuous support from our speakers, from our audience. If we can get the proper support, then definitely we will distribute our content. The reason behind that, I'm from a developing nation, and I find when I first moved to the Oxford University, my life, my think process, my analytical skills, everything changed. So I want the more developing nation youth community, they engage with this global community, global speaker like you, world-class talent like you. They can understand more. Even example today, they understand about innovations, different opportunities. So this is actually our objective. We want to create more good opportunities for the youth community. So there is a many talent around the world. So our objective, we want to connect all of the talented people and need all of your support. If you support us, I'm sure in between 2021, yesterday we were successful. Our team was really successful. So hopefully we will continue our journey and we will reach our 100 million people. Already many university, many schools, many countries, government, education ministry, they are supporting us, and they said that what they are observing, the World Talent Economy Forum, it's really, really helpful for them. So we need more of your support. And many corporations, like they're joining with us from the developing nations. So I'm sure that how you contributing, it will be really, really effective for the creating better ecosystem. And hopefully future, we will arrange more conference, and we have a target to develop a university. So we need talent peoples and professional people like you. So I want to go for the concluding remarks. I want to start from Dr. William, then Mr. Alex, then Mr. Rob, and Professor Donald finally. Yes.
Okay, freedom through connectivity. Freedom through connectivity. Grab hold, be bold, get your people rolling, and then unleash them. I used it the other day. I said, deregulate my ability to be creative and run amok. I'd like to run around in the world with creative ideas. I say that, but I also want to just kind of emphasize and reinforce something that you said, Dr. Sharif, and that is simply this, that building the forum that you have with the speakers and the guests and the people that I'm proud to meet and call colleagues, that it really is interesting, and I can say this for myself. I don't know how the other guests feel, but I find it just as intriguing and a learning exercise from the students and from the audience. Because quite frankly, today I learned something from Rob. I had never even thought about it. I'm going to spend probably the afternoon bothering my significant other, talking about, all the time we've saved with, the increased remote collaboration. And she'll be like, yeah, well, then I'll just talk to you on the phone. Why don't we? And she'll be like, get rid of you. The point is, though, that I learn a great deal from everybody involved. And I think that's just as powerful as we circulate around the globe. And I'm proud to be part of the forum. So, Dr. Sharif, thank you. Alex, thank you. Rob, pleasure to meet you. And Professor Donald, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. William, for your support. Mr. Alex.
Yes. So as I always appreciate these groups, and I'm thankful and appreciative that Sharif, you're reaching so many people with this content. As I always appreciate Dr. Williams and Donald's contributions, extremely intelligent people, I'm very thankful and value that Rob had a chance to join this show. I learned a lot from him, and he seems like he's an expert in this field with this topic. So I appreciated that he joined with us. So I did, again, we didn't mention hydrogen storage in this conversation. So if anyone's still watching towards the end of this video, hydrogen storage, I think is towards the direction of innovation. And as Rob mentioned, all these cars and transitioning towards electric and all the negative consequences, I think that it's possibly one step back to take two steps forward. And we're seeing a lot of that around the world as we try to get towards global sustainability. I think that the ride sharing is going to happen, but now we've been set back because of the pandemic. But I think the self-driving taxis are going to continue to increase around the world. And those self-driving taxis are going to allow a lot of people not be dependent on a vehicle, or may not purchase a vehicle at all, because the self-driving taxis will then get them from point A to point B. I did want to mention to answer a question that I failed to answer earlier. How could developing countries, progress towards globalization and industrial everything and sustainability? So I think I've been to Ghana, I've been to Iraq, I've been to the Philippines, Nepal, Costa Rica, Mexico, and a lot of other countries. What I've noticed in those countries, and a lot of those countries, is corruption. Just bad people selfishly slowing down the potential progress of the country. And I think if we solve corruption, whether it's from like the United Nations or some sort of we just need more good people getting involved in politics, becoming police officers, becoming, the judges and the mayors and the council and everything. We just need more good people to offset the corrupt people that are systemic throughout our society. And I think that corruption in different countries is slowing down, again, the progress of the country and the quality of life of everyone. So I hope that gets addressed in different countries around the world. And again, I think internet's really important, and cell phones, and the individual initiative to try to self-educate yourself the best you can. And one last thing, this shift, just try to incorporate green technology, sustainability, and everything environmental that you can with this transition, so we can continue to lower.
I've got to run. My next meeting is just starting, so
okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rob. Thank you. Professor Donald.
I want to emphasize that the innovation, development, and those things require interaction between different social worlds.
Okay,
and
right.
by a social world, you really wind up, it becomes reality to you. And so sometimes that's a difficulty when you're talking to somebody else, is that the things that you're talking about are different. You're not talking about the same things. And it's been shown that I have a couple of papers, that when people live in a foreign country for a while, then they come back, they score twice as high on tests of innovation. And so my point is that all of us really need to start developing ways that we can get into other social worlds. Reading fiction actually winds up helping a lot. So start reading, read Catch-22, read Memories of Past Time, read Lolita. That's a fabulous book. It's one of the best books I've ever read. So funny. And if you just concentrate on engineering, it's difficult to get into other people's worlds. But that's the key for what you can do to become successful. And that's how innovation happens. So incremental innovation, that's why Toyota would allow the lowest person on the assembly line to be able to make comments about how to make the assembly line better. And so incrementally, they just make things better and better so they can make things cheaper and less impactful on the environment and all kinds of different things. So for your own personal self and for your society, at a policy level, as I said, the Finns have gone to a lot of effort now to try and make sure that they're interacting with lots of different people all around the world, and it works. And as a personal level, you don't know who's going to be able to help you. You could meet them in a laundromat. So being able to just open your mind and have the cognitive flexibility to be able to start getting into other people's worlds is the key to personal success. I'm absolutely convinced, because our identity is created by the information that we get from people around us, the information we get from the media. I mean, that's all we have to know what the world is. And we make up the world based on that, and ourselves based on that information. And if we can get out of our own place and start changing, ourselves change, the world changes, everything changes, and you're open to being able to get information from people that you wouldn't even know existed. So that's what I think that's our challenge.
Great closing remark. Really cool. Yeah.
Thank you everyone for joining today's sessions. So we have more sessions this week. I want that you definitely gonna join in these sessions. I think day after tomorrow we have a session. So this is really important, and we can promise all of our audience and all our guests that as much as possible, the remote area where actually maybe they do not have internet, maybe they do not have enough support, but World Talent Economy Forum, definitely with our team, we definitely reach out this students, this community, as well as we will develop a better ecosystem around the world with the help of our guest. Thank you, Dr. William. Thank you, Mr. Alex. And thank you, Professor Donald, for your support and everything. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.